You're listening to the Reds Podcast.
This is episode number 64, and we're talking about how to make life transitions easier. Maybe you've got one job, you want to go to another job. Maybe you've got a job and you want to ditch it entirely to be self-employed. We're talking about how to make life transitions easier on this episode of the Red Podcast.
This is the Red Podcast. Real entrepreneur development. Make more money, work less, and live a life of freedom. No BS advice that really works. Here's your hosts, David Hooper and Laurel Staples.
Every time I get back from vacation, I feel like I need another week vacation. Does this happen to you?
Yeah. Well, I think transitions. I think we need an on-ramp and an off-ramp because when I go on vacation, it takes me a few days to kind of ease into it.
Into the vacation?
Yeah.
See, I'm an instant ease into the vacation person. I'm like there. I'm like, all right.
You're ready for a break.
I am ready for a break.
Yeah.
It does take me a little while to actually transition into the vacation while I'm still here. Like I'll have to pack and have to plan everything. Then when I get there, I'm like transitioned.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you go on more vacations than I do. You've had a lot more experience.
I'm just more fun than you are. I don't know. Well, I think I do like traveling a little more than you do.
Yeah, well, you're not 6'3" and don't fit in the seats.
Well, I don't like airplanes more than you,
Yeah.
but I like going places and trying new foods and seeing people and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
But coming back, that is a challenge. When we got back from our honeymoon, you know, when we see all the presents on the table and we got to write the thank you notes and we got to get back into doing business, and it's a struggle to get back into it.
I was actually really excited to get back from the honeymoon, and here's why. Honeymoon is kind of like rehab. Like I know a lot of people, they've been in 30 days of rehab. Before they went there, they were on heroin, cocaine, whatever, and they're good in rehab. They can get it together, but it's in the real world that they have a hard time. And for me, I didn't want to live with you in like a la-la land. I enjoyed the honeymoon, no doubt. What I was really excited about, though, was living with you in the real world and going down the streets of Nashville and feeling what it was like to have a wife.
I don't know. I could have stayed in Arizona a lot longer at the resort and felt like that on the massage table.
It was nice. We're going to get back there again. We went to Arizona, Sedona, Arizona, specifically, for about a week. Really nice place out there called Enchantment. Look it up if you're ever in Sedona, Arizona. Really, really cool place. A lot of hiking out there. We had some ATVs, a lot of natural food. It was kind of like a hippie heaven.
It was pretty awesome.
It was very nice, very nice.
But now we're transitioned back into Nashville.
We sure are. This is the Red Podcast. Red stands for Real Entrepreneur Development. We're for authors, bloggers, writers, speakers, coaches, anybody with something to say. If you've got a message and you want to get it out, we are for you. You are in the right place. We're here to help you have longevity. We want you around 5, 10, 20 years from now, however long you want to be around, we will help you. Like Laurel coming back from a vacation, there are on-ramps and off-ramps for entrepreneurs constantly. We're always in transition. I saw something on Facebook earlier, and this is how we're going to start off this episode. It was from a woman named Christy. What'd you say, Laurel?
Christy said, I am so sad today. 10 weeks ago, I left a job I loathed, and now I'm working somewhere that I really like, and it pays $10,000 more, but I'm away from home much more. Left the house at 5 a.m. yesterday and didn't get home until 10 p.m., which means I didn't see my daughter, who's 18 months old, at all other than a quick FaceTime because she picked up the phone and asked for me. It breaks my heart that she is so used to me being on the phone. Had the morning off and stayed home with her for a couple extra hours, but now I'm crying in the driveway because I just took her to daycare so I can get ready to leave for work. I hated my old job. It paid very little and made me miserable, but I had practically unlimited time off. This job is great except for the travel. The travel isn't permanent, but it is here for the next few weeks or months. I don't think I made the wrong decision, but the time away is much more and much harder than I imagined. What do you think of that, David?
Well, she's in transition. It's exactly what we are talking about. She's on the on-ramp for something new, and it could be better, but when you're used to something, even if it's not great, sometimes it's tough to transition to something better just because you're not comfortable with it.
And with her, it looks like she made the best decision she could at the time, going for a job that paid her more money, that she loves, and moving away from something that she didn't like, but she had to give up something in the meantime. And I think a lot of us go through that as entrepreneurs, is we're trying to move towards what we want and we're trying to move away from what we don't want. And sometimes it can get sticky in the middle there.
I remember when I was in junior high, and at the time, I had been playing tennis on a fairly regular basis for a couple of years. And when I say fairly regular basis, every summer when the weather was nice, I would hop on a bus. I would go to a tennis center, which was at a local park at a community center. And it was a big, big tennis center. I would stay there until it got dark, and then I would ride a bus home. During school, in the school year when it was in session, I would stay after school to work on my game, and I worked on my game a lot. I wasn't a naturally gifted tennis player, though. It was very tough for me for some reason. I joked around earlier about being 6'3", and I was probably about that size in junior high, so I was kind of big, clunky, nice reach, but not really the fastest runner on the court. Anyway, I thought I wasn't going to make the tennis team. And I remember telling my mother, Mom, I think this isn't for me. I'm ready to quit, stop these tryouts, because it wasn't going well. It was much more difficult than I expected. And she looked at me and she said, David, you've been playing for a couple of years. You're really serious about it. You love it. You hop on the bus early, go an hour to the tennis center, play all day, come back an hour home. Stick this thing out. Don't change your tune just because things are getting a little hard. And I think that's easy to do. I think it's easy to do. Without that, I might have lived my whole life like that. And I'm not saying Christy is doing that, but I think we all get into that mode when we're going against something tough. We start to change our mind about what it is that we think that we want. And I would say for anybody going through any kind of transition, first of all, you've got to know what you want, know what your vision is, know what your values are. Why are you doing something? We've talked about this before. When you know your why, it makes the how a lot easier. Obviously, she wanted more money. She's got a daughter. She wants something better for her daughter and for herself, and sometimes those transitions are tough.
Knowing your values is really important because it does help you make those choices along the way. When you come to a fork in the road, you look at both options and say, okay, which one leads me closer to my goals and closer to the values that I have created for myself? And if you don't know those, you're not going to know which fork in the road to choose. I
think it's important when you're going through a transition to have a community that you enjoy and that you trust. Laurel, you and I have a relationship where we're going to be honest with each other and have that conversation like my mother had with me and say, look, chalk it up. This is what you said that you wanted. You've been working on it. Now that it's getting a little tough, don't give up. But at the same time, if you get into something that you don't like, that's going to tell you, hey, you don't need to stick with this. So having a third party, somebody who's not involved in the specific situation that you're in, that can really be beneficial as well.
So did you stick with tennis? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, I did stick with tennis. I stuck with tennis for another couple of years, and at that point, that's when really music took over for me, and I felt like I couldn't do all of it.
I think the community that you're talking about here, David, is really important no matter what stage you are in your life, whether you're going through a transition or not, to have people that are around you that are going to support you to make mistakes, to go down your own path, to make your own choices, but also be that mirror for you when you might start to try to give up too soon, to be able to come to you and be honest. And that's something that's really helped me along the way. I'm that person who's always had a best friend. From the time I can remember, I've always had that one best girlfriend that's been that person for me growing up. That person has transitioned over the years, but I think I would have turned out a lot differently if it wasn't for that. So it can be one person for you, it can be your partner, it can be your friend, or it can be a community like a church or whatever that looks like for you. But just to have that support system there is going to help you through any transition in your life.
I think it's really good to have somebody who's going to call you on your BS. That's how I would describe it. And sometimes if you don't have a friend that you feel is going to be honest with you, I think a life coach, that's where a coach could come in handy, somebody that you're paying and you're paying them to be honest with you. I think that could be a time to maybe look at that. If you feel like you don't have that kind of community, you can usually find somebody that you can pay for that kind of support.
I think third on the list of something that's going to help you get through a transition is ask yourself, what do you enjoy most?
Yeah, absolutely. Outside of work, what is it that you want to do? In other words, why are you working? I think for Christy, her daughter is important. She wants to spend more time with her daughter. And looking at what she said from this lens, what do you enjoy most? Maybe it's that Christy did make a decision where she didn't have all the information, and because of that made the wrong decision. Maybe it is taking up too much time. Maybe she is on the road too much, and the money doesn't matter. It's not that important because it doesn't cost her any money to hang out with her daughter. So that's the thing in this. If I said, hey, Christy, what do you enjoy most outside of work? That's where I would start to maybe question the decision a little bit.
Also, in addition to that, I mean, you do have to be doing work that you enjoy. And Christy seems to be in a predicament because she had unlimited time off with a job that she didn't like, and now she's in a job that she loves and she has no time off to spend with her daughter. You need both of those to be in balance. And the key for Christy would probably be to transition again into a job that she likes that gives her more time off. But you have to have both of those in place. You can't just sacrifice 40 hours a week to do something you hate so you can work on your business outside of work or spend time with your friends or whatever you like to do. You have to have enjoyment in both aspects of your life.
I think anytime you're in a transition, it's important to know that you're not going to go from where you are to where you want to be directly. To get to where you want to be, it's a lot of mini transitions. It's a lot of decisions, and you're not always going to pick a winner. You're going to make some mistakes. You're going to have some failure. I think embracing the failure, we always say in the direct marketing field, fail fast and fail often. If you've made the wrong decision at any time, it's okay for you to go back to where you were or for you to move forward by making a different decision. So if this second job, for example, that Christy has, the new job, if it's not working, she could go to a third job or she could go back to her old job. I think the problem with going backwards is sometimes if you go backwards and you don't like it, because she said she was miserable at that first job, well, leaving a second time from your first job can be a little bit more difficult than leaving the first time. So sometimes it's better to go ahead and go for a second transition to maybe a third job in this case.
I like that you said, David, that there's no straight shot to success. I feel like when we look at other people's lives from the outside looking in, it looks like they started at point A and went to success at point B, and it was just like a linear line going there. And what's actually happening in our lives and their lives from the inside out is it's a major zigzag. I mean, there are ups and there are downs, and you go this way and that way, and there are swirls in there until you reach point B. And I think you just have to realize that, is know that what you said, David, there are a lot of decisions that you have to make along the way and a lot of tweaks that you have to make along the way to get from point A to point B. And you should just factor that in and know that maybe you took a job that doesn't give you enough time off. Well, you haven't failed. You're not a failure. You just have to correct course a little. And whatever Christy is going to learn at this new job, she's going to be able to take to the next job and to the next thing that she does in her life. And so it's just making these little tweaks along the way, but knowing what your values are so you ultimately get to where you want to go.
Absolutely. And it's important to keep in mind that when we look at somebody else, we only have half the story. We have the outside, the facade, the superficialness. We don't see what's going on in the inside, so we don't see those mistakes. We also don't see how things really are for them. I think that's important in any kind of long-term process. We've certainly talked about it here before, Laurel, with your book, for example. The writing process, that's very, very difficult, and nobody talks about that. We just see the finished book. Same thing is true for Christy or anybody who's doing a job transition. We don't see what it took for them to get a good job that they like. We just see them as CEO, for example, or on television as the boss of this company. We don't see all the mistakes that they had to make. It's very important to keep it in mind that we're not getting the entire picture. We can't compare ourselves to other people because we don't know where they are or what they've been through.
If you think about it, when you read what Christy has to say, when you feel empathetic or sympathetic for her and her situation, but think about if she had written it just from kind of an outside point of view of her life, or maybe you'd seen a picture of her or something, and she wrote on Facebook, I just got this great new job and I love it, and it pays me $10,000 more, and it's great. How many women, how many of her friends on Facebook would be jealous of her? See her perfect 18-month-old baby and her brand new job and her new clothes that came along with it. They'd be like, oh, I wish I had that life. Why am I stuck where I am? And I think we just have to realize that what makes what Christy said so unique is she's giving us a glimpse behind the curtain, which is what we're all experiencing right now, is we're in constant transition.
Right. It's worth saying, speaking of facade, that usually what we see on Facebook is the good stuff. We see the pictures that people liked where they looked really, really good in them, the very flattering pictures. We see people talking about how great their husband is, how great their relationships are.
Yeah, go to my page if you want all that.
She's talking about how great I am on there.
I know. No.
We see really just that sliver of what they're doing. And I know people that travel around the world because of my work in the music business, and it's easy to look at these guys. They say, oh, I'm on tour with Taylor Swift, and here we are in New York City. We're playing Madison Square Garden tonight. And having been on those shows and worked backstage and done load in and load out and done the behind-the-scenes work, I can tell you they're not talking about that, because that stuff is not fun at all. They're trying to make themselves look a little bit more glamorous than they actually are. And that happens a lot. And that's why I think that Facebook can be really, really dangerous when you're going through something like this. You think you're the only one. So I congratulate Christy for being honest and open and being so raw by saying, hey, I might have gotten myself into something that I'm not really happy about.
At the same time, what I kind of mentioned before, life is an experiment. And we're all experimenting, we're all trying to figure it out, and nobody has it all figured out. So I think the last thing on the list that I would say, David, is to be grateful, is to have gratitude for where you are and know that it's just going to help you go to where you want to go.
I mentioned coaching and hiring coaches earlier in this episode, and there's a guy that I've been working with for a few years now. His name is Trip Lanier. He's got a great podcast called The New Man, and you can find out more about him at triplanier.com if you're interested. But Trip is really great about making you show appreciation for what's going on. And what I mean by that is finding the good elements of something. For example, your house burnt down. Well, what is good about that? Well, let's say that you're going to get a payout from the insurance company and you've got an opportunity to find a new place to live. Your transmission broke, you need a new car. Well, you've got an opportunity for a new car. Even the worst things, the very worst things that you can think of, there are always good things that come from them. And I'll give you one that seems bad, almost unbelievable for anybody to think about. When I was in college, I lived and worked for a quadriplegic. This is a man who had no use of his four limbs. He could move his head, basically. You moved him from the bed to a wheelchair that he operated with his mouth. And I remember talking to him about this accident that put him in this chair where he'll be for the rest of his life, and about the process of what he went through and the mindset that he had to have to go ahead and get a master's degree and become an accountant and do what he's doing now, what he was doing then. He talked about the good that came from it. He said, man, I was living a crazy life. I was partying all the time, drinking, drugs, who knows what he was doing. And this got him on the straight and narrow. He said, I think I would be dead had it not been for that accident. And when you compare 6 feet under with being in a chair, well, being in a chair for him was pretty good. So I think that you can find the good in everything. And it was a real inspiration for me, and it's something that I've carried on since then.
You do have to look at the good in your transitions in your life, and that's something that's going to keep you on the path and keep you going.
If you've got questions, if you've got comments, you've got suggestions for future Red Podcast episodes, feel free to reach out to us. Laurel and I are available at redpodcast.com. You can ask us questions there. Leave us your comments. We're happy to hear from you. We'd appreciate it if you'd help spread the word. If you like what we're doing and you want to help build the real entrepreneur community, we would love that. You can do that by telling a friend about this episode, telling a friend about the podcast. Also, by going to iTunes, searching for Red Podcast and leaving us a rating, leaving us a review. When you do that, that helps us to come up more frequently and higher in the search engines. When somebody's searching for something like entrepreneurship, that will help us to build the community, get more downloads, and spread this message. We appreciate you, and we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Red Podcast.
You've been listening to Red Podcast, Real Entrepreneur Development. Subscribe today using iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS at redpodcast.com.